Go buy my new ebook, American Dysfunction Trumps Politics, available at Amazon Kindle for only $8. Before I begin, ThoughtSlime mentioned that Mr. Poole brought the no-go zone up in his video description instead of his video. Also that Tim said this term is colloquialism. This is false. I've just looked this term's definition up, which is a no-go area or no-go zone is an area in a town barricaded off to civil authorities by a force, such as a paramilitary, or an area barred to certain individuals or groups.
Well, the real violent crimes have increased in Malmö, while the other crimes have been at a more stable level or even decreased. Well, so there is a problem in Malmö.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it has anything to do with Sweden bringing in refugees?
No, I don't. But I do think it has something to do with the people who have come here as refugees sometimes for the last 20 years are often stuck in poverty and unemployment. And we really, when you don't...
He states that poverty and unemployment are the main reason for the violence. And while I don't agree that neither can be linked to violence, he is at least looking at the reasons. I'm sure this gentleman understands that the social ills are psychological. All you're doing, Tim, is asking people if they believe refugees are the problem. You showed a segment of you asking that lady in your video intro, which I guess comes later.
See any future. Crime is a way to gain respect and to gain status. And if you are a young male, that is all over the world, that is what you want. You can turn to crime or violence.
We've heard a bunch of interesting things. One thing we heard from someone is that Sweden has very, very great welfare benefits. You know, the government takes care of its poor people.
And try to.
Yeah, I mean, much better than the United States, I hear, right? That there is housing provided and, you know, money, like stipends. Is this true? Yeah?
Yes, it's true. You get it's not very much money you get, but you get enough to live. Yeah. And you get your housing paid. And so on. There is a problem though. We don't have enough. We don't have enough apartments for everybody. So there, especially in this area, there are too many people living in too small spaces. But I find it's much more useful to talk about the problems if you want to solve them. Because if we cover them up or try to look away, then they will still be around.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's what a lot of conservatives have said in the US, that simply acting like the problem isn't there won't fix them.
ThoughtSlime has already commented on the conservatives' take on problems. I mentioned in my book that conservatives don't care about problems, they create problems, while liberalism is a static political ideology. Tim concerns himself with Nils' political stance, while I don't even know what Tim is trying to accomplish here. He said the conservatives are concerned about talking about problems instead of masking them, while he's over there trying to link increased violence with refugees.
Well, that is true. I'll give them that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I guess, how do you consider yourself? Are you liberal? Are you center? Are you conservative?
The words are used a bit differently in Sweden than they are in America.
Of course.
Here, I am most certainly a liberal.
Yeah. Some people told us that you were a liberal in Sweden, and I said a liberal in Sweden is probably very, very liberal to an American.
I'm trying to follow American politics a bit. I think some of you would call me a socialist, because liberals in Sweden are not against this free housing and stipends and so on, which are...
Now, is it really free? As in, no money is involved whatsoever? Or does free mean it's already paid for through taxes? I think the main problem is that many don't understand what socialism actually is, or what Bernie's idea of what socialism is. Bernie wants to abolish student debt and socialize healthcare, which those who oppose argue against these proposals using the buzzword free. But that can't be because nobody would work for free. The problem is, I'm a nobody on YouTube, and I can't find out what anybody is thinking. Of course, if I was to unknowingly make a false statement because my understanding is wrong, I would get called out and mocked because most people are in a mental bubble and attack anybody with a different belief or opinion. Most of those people being conservative and religious. The same could also happen with any sensible persona, but only because they're so used to dealing with psychotic political ideologues who are against the people, which I can understand.
Free healthcare, which what I get is often called socialistic ideas in America. But here I am a liberal.
Well, so violent crime has gone up, like murders.
There have been a significant increase in the number of murders in Malmö over the last few years.
One thing we found interesting, last year I believe there were 13, is that the number? We've gotten different numbers from different people.
I'm looking at, I think it was 11.
11? Someone said 14, someone said 13, but I'll say we can settle on 11,
yes,
right around there.
But 11 murders on a population of 300,000 is very much.
For Sweden?
For Sweden, yes. Of course, I'm talking in a Swedish or even European perspective, but 11 is much. We usually get around 1 or 2 a year in Malmö.
What's causing this increase in murders?
Okay, so Tim does understand there are reasons, and is also interested. Or is he? I know to keep listening, so that's what I intend to do here.
It's very hard to say specifically, but one thing I'm told by
that there is a huge influx in sexual crimes in Sweden.
They're discussing sexual assault and rape now, which confuses me because ThoughtSlime pointed out Tim's suspicious mention of no-go zone in his description, instead of mentioning it in his video, along with his false explanation that no-go zone is colloquialism. Also, his attempt to link a violence increase to refugees, while mafia is later mentioned. Has Nils enlightened Tim when he said violence stemmed from poverty and unemployment, meaning there are causes? Again, Tim seemed to have the agenda of linking the violence increase to refugees. What was the point of Tim's visit to Sweden? I'm confused.
We've been told that it's simply because Sweden has a wider law, more encompassing, and that people tend to report more. But I guess I'd like to get your thoughts on the whole issue and just talk about it a little bit.
Well, Sweden has changed its laws regarding sexual assault and rape and sexual misconduct in a way that it's more encompassing. So it's more actions are defined as rape or sexual assault now than before, and every report is followed up, and you get support for the crime victims and often rather speedy trials, and that increases the will to report the crime. If you know that something will be done, then you're more likely to report. And we're actually working now to get an even broader definition of rape through the Riksdag, the national parliament. Taking a large number of refugees when you don't have housing for everybody and you don't have a functioning job market, where there is a job market for people with the skill levels that most refugees tend to have, there is a language barrier, of course, is a strain on any society. I do think it's a moral obligation, though. The problem is the wars that make turn people into refugees, not the...
Nils brings the refugees back up, but he talks about war this time. What I've noticed so far, though, is that Tim hasn't said anything. He's only been asking questions. Tim has a bad reputation that I've observed in live stream chats, but he hasn't said anything yet. I only know that Tim is a comic book fanatic.
Refugees. So of course it's a problem, but the crimes we've seen, the violent crimes, we have nothing to support, no evidence in support of thinking that it's the refugees who are committing these crimes, the violent crimes, the murders or the shootings or whatever. But people born outside of Sweden are overrepresented in crime statistics.
I see. So then Sweden has seen much more, or I should say Malmö has seen much more murders this past year. And one thing we've noticed is that I think we heard in the past 4 weeks there's been a murder every week. Is that?
There's been, I think, taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah. So that was Nils. He's a politician. the interesting thing is when we first came to this spot, the people here told us they had just experienced some kind of crime and the police were on their way, but were told it wasn't a priority. They asked us not to speak about it, but at least, I'd like to bring it up to let you know that this is the area we're in and this is what we experienced. And I'll also say, look, Nils, he said he's biased, and that's a very liberal perspective, so take that into account. We've got more interviews to do, we've got more experts to meet, and this is a daily thing, so, expect more, right? We're gonna head out now, meet up with a family, and...
What does that mean? Tim finally made a comment, but it makes no sense. It's a vague comment. I mean, that's all he has to say about Nils. I've learned nothing so far.
Hopefully, we'll be staying in Rosengard tonight, one of the problem areas. So we're here with Johan at his flat in Rosengard. This is beautiful. This looks it's very nice. I'm from the south side of Chicago. I've also been to places in Ukraine and Venezuela, and if this really is considered to be, the poorest or worst place in Sweden, wow. Sweden's doing pretty well, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
The floors are very nice, and there's a lot of space, big rooms.
Yeah.
This is it's crazy to think that people view this as a war zone, like it's very bad, right?
Yeah. Right now it's dark, so you don't even see the war zone.
But you assure me that there are
artillery all the time,
gang battles happening.
Yeah.
Do you notice anything outside at night? Is any violence?
I mean, the one murder of the 16-year-old boy that was down at the Amilasgatan, the street down there. So I mean, we had the sirens on our wall.
Oh, wow.
It was close, and that was of course frightening, but that's about it, I think.
Have there been any other incidents like that, or any kind of, maybe not a murder, but have you seen robberies or gang activity?
No, not at all. I mean, there was one 14-year-old that went that had like a pretty loud cracker,
a firecracker.
Firecracker, yeah. Yeah, it's embarrassing somehow that people are even talking about it like that without knowing. I don't know.
Hi. Hi there.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
There are people saying that coming, not even specifying the area we go to. Like if you're just going Rosengard, it's so bad. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it isn't bad. It has been...
Vad ska jag säga?
Det har varit mycket bättre innan. Mycket bättre.
Bättre?
Det har varit bättre på
Det var
Rosengård.
bättre innan? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, she thinks it was better before.
Before.
How long did you live here, Almedina?
24 years.
All right.
So do you think that there's been more violent crime?
At the last 2 years, maybe.
Do you think that has anything to do with refugees?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Does it scare you? Does that bother you?
No, not that much, because I think...
Asking if that scares her is the best question Tim can think of asking. Yeah, I think this guy's just clueless. I'll leave this at that.